one thing I don't like about the modern swing, basically you stick your butt out.
Miller says Nicholas played chicken golf. That would be wonderful.
I don't think Walt's in there like John Wayne, but he probably could do it. But
Johnny Miller was one of the greatest ball strikers golf has ever seen. His legendary status came from 25 PGA Tour wins and 2 major championships. But Miller became just as famous for something else. After hanging up his clubs, he spent nearly 3 decades in the broadcast booth saying things other commentators would never dare to say. He called out players for choking. He criticized their technique. He even made comments that sparked national controversy. Miller did not hold back, and that created some serious tension with 5 players in particular. Let's talk about the golfers who felt the sharpest edge of Miller's brutal honesty. Before we dive into the drama, let's understand who Johnny Miller really was. Born in 1947, Miller turned pro in 1969 after playing college golf at Brigham Young University. His rise to fame came quickly. In 1973, at the U.S. Open held at Oakmont Country Club, Miller entered the final round 6 shots behind the leaders. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Miller fired an 8 under par 63, hitting every single green in regulation. That round is still talked about as possibly the greatest single round of golf ever played. The 63 stood as the major championship scoring record for over 40 years. Miller had announced himself to the world in the most spectacular way possible. The following year proved Miller was no fluke. In 1974, he won 8 tournaments on the PGA Tour. He set a record by winning the first 3 events of the season. He finished as the leading money winner with over $353,000. He also won PGA Player of the Year. These accomplishments were huge because they meant Miller had temporarily knocked Jack Nicklaus off the top spot. Nicklaus finished second on the money list that year. Miller earned the nickname Golf's New Golden Boy from Newsweek magazine in 1975. His ability to dominate when it mattered most was clear for everyone to see. Miller earned another nickname that showed just how deadly he could be. They called him the Desert Fox because of his incredible success in Arizona. In 1975, Miller won the Phoenix Open by a jaw-dropping 14 strokes. He shot a 61 in the second round. Across 8 major wins in the desert, his scoring average on Sundays was 65.5. That kind of dominance came from swagger, style, and substance. Miller always felt like he needed to extend his lead because he did not trust his putting, so he attacked the course relentlessly. He wanted to knock the flag out of the hole because no lead ever felt safe enough. Miller's ball striking ability was what set him apart. Fred Couples once said Miller was probably the best ball striker ever. Jack Nicklaus called him the best short iron player ever. Miller's swing had an early wrist cock on the takeaway. He could shape shots any way he wanted. Draw, fade, high, low. Whatever the situation called for, Miller could pull it off. His drives were straight and accurate. His approach shots were even better. Everything about his technique was rooted in sound principles. Miller was a machine from tee to green. But then something went wrong. After winning his second major at the 1976 Open Championship at Royal Birkdale, Miller started struggling badly with his putting. He developed what golfers fear most: the yips. This mental and mechanical breakdown was brutal. Miller went 3 years without winning a single tournament. He tried everything to fix it. He changed his grip. He adjusted his stance. He even used a 48-inch long putter that he tucked under his armpit to try to stabilize the club. Nothing worked consistently. Miller publicly admitted he had the yips. He said it was hard to solve because the problem could be mechanical or mental or both. This struggle with the yips became the key to understanding Miller's later career as a commentator. Miller had experienced the highest highs. He shot that legendary 63 at Oakmont, but he also experienced the crushing lows of mental breakdown on the biggest stages. When Miller later criticized other players for choking, he was not speaking as some outsider. He was speaking as someone who knew exactly what it felt like to fall apart under pressure. His standard for analyzing players became ruthless because he had lived through that pain himself. Miller's own battle with nerves shaped how he viewed everyone else's performance. The yips haunted Miller for years. It was not something that just went away. Even when Miller managed to control it somewhat, the fear was always there. The mental side of golf became Miller's obsession. He understood better than most broadcasters what happens inside a player's head when the pressure mounts. That intimate knowledge of failure gave Miller a unique perspective, but it also made him less forgiving. Miller knew how fragile confidence could be. He had watched his own game crumble despite having one of the best swings in golf history. That experience made him both more insightful and more critical when he saw other players struggle. Miller finally won again in 1994 at the AT&T Pebble Beach National Pro-Am. He was 46 years old and basically in semi-retirement. To sink the winning putt, Miller had to use a mental trick. He pretended to be his son, who was a clutch putter. Only by imagining he was someone else could Miller get the ball in the hole. That shows how deep his putting struggles ran. Even late in his career, the yips were always there, lurking in his mind. This final victory was bittersweet. It proved Miller could still win, but it also showed he never fully conquered his mental demons. In 1990, Miller moved into the broadcast booth with NBC. Right away, he made waves. Miller's commentary was unvarnished and unapologetic. He did not sugarcoat anything. During his very first event, the 1990 Bob Hope Chrysler Classic, Miller said something shocking. His friend Peter Jacobsen was leading the tournament. Miller said on air that Jacobsen had the perfect lie downhill and over water that he could choke on. Miller actually used the word choke. That was a huge taboo in golf commentary. Nobody said that word, but Miller did. He was committed to direct psychological analysis instead of polite commentary. The golf world was not used to this kind of honesty. Traditional golf broadcasters spoke in hushed, reverent tones. They praised every shot. They rarely pointed out mental mistakes or technical flaws. Miller threw that approach out the window. He analyzed golf the way a surgeon analyzes a patient. He identified problems. He pointed out weaknesses. He did not care if his words made players uncomfortable. Miller believed the audience deserved honest analysis, not cheerleading. That philosophy made him revolutionary in sports broadcasting. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Miller's controversial career, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. What do you think about Miller's approach? Was he too harsh? Or did golf need someone willing to speak the truth? Let me know your thoughts on his broadcast style. Miller had a clear philosophy as a broadcaster. He wanted to generate strong reactions. He once said, "You want to be the most popular announcer in your sport, but you also want to be one of the least popular. No fence riding. Elicit a response." That's what they're looking for. Miller knew his filter was not great. He admitted his filter was pretty poor, but he believed his heart was in the right spot. Miller wanted to shake things up. He wanted viewers to have strong opinions about what he said, and he definitely succeeded in that goal. Miller's approach divided golf fans completely. Some viewers loved his honesty. They appreciated that Miller treated them like intelligent adults who could handle the truth. These fans were tired of bland commentary that never criticized anyone. Miller gave them real insight into what was happening on the course. He explained why players failed. He broke down technical problems. He talked about the mental game in ways no other broadcaster did. For these fans, Miller was exactly what golf commentary needed, but other viewers found Miller abrasive and disrespectful. They felt he crossed lines. They thought his criticism was too personal. They believed Miller was using his platform to tear down players rather than build them up. These critics argued that Miller's own failures made him too harsh. They suggested Miller was projecting his insecurities onto the current generation of players. The debate over Miller's style raged throughout his entire broadcasting career. There was no consensus. People either loved him or hated him. Miller retired from broadcasting in 2019 after 29 years. He decided to step away to spend more time with his family. He said the call of being there for his grandkids was a higher priority. Miller walked away from the booth, but his impact on golf commentary remained huge. He had changed the way analysts talked about the game forever. Future broadcasters now had to decide whether to follow Miller's brutally honest approach or return to the more polite style that came before him. Now let's talk about the 5 players who had the most tension with Miller. The first 2 were his on-course rivals from the 1970s, Jack Nicklaus and Tom Weiskopf. These relationships were built on fierce competition during tournaments. The friction was professional, not personal. It was about who could win the biggest titles and dominate the tour. Jack Nicklaus was the biggest name in golf during Miller's peak years. Nicklaus was the established giant. Miller's challenge to Nicklaus reached its highest point in 1974. That was the year Miller won 8 times and became the leading money winner. Miller took both the money title and the Player of the Year award. That meant Miller had surpassed the game's undisputed #1 in every measurable way. It was a huge disruption of the existing power structure. For 1 year, Miller stood on top of the golf world. The rivalry between Miller and Nicklaus peaked at the 1975 Masters. That tournament is still remembered as one of the greatest Masters ever. Miller played incredible golf on the weekend. He shot 65 and 66 in the final 2 rounds. But Miller and Tom Weiskopf both finished tied for second place. They fell 1 stroke short of Nicklaus, who won the tournament. Even with Miller playing his absolute best golf, Nicklaus still found a way to win. That result proved Nicklaus could hold off Miller even when Miller was at his most dangerous. The Miller-Nicklaus rivalry could have been one of the all-time great battles in golf, but it did not last long enough. After 1976, Miller's struggles with the yips meant he could not sustain that level. The dynamic changed. Miller went from being a genuine threat to Nicklaus to being a talented but flawed peer. Despite the competitive tension, both men respected each other's abilities. Nicklaus later praised Miller's skills, calling him the best short iron player ever. Both men also shared a unique bond. They both won the U.S. Open at Oakmont. Nicklaus did it in 1962. Miller did it in 1973. Conquering that famously difficult course connected them in a special way. Tom Weiskopf was another major rival for Miller. Weiskopf had an elegant swing and a fiery temper. People called him the Towering Inferno because of his volcanic personality. Weiskopf found himself going head-to-head with Miller repeatedly in big tournaments. The pattern was clear. Weiskopf often could not close out victories when Miller was playing well. In 1972, Weiskopf finished one shot behind Miller at the Sea Pines Heritage Classic. That was Miller's second PGA Tour win. The next year at the 1973 U.S. Open, where Miller shot his legendary 63, Weiskopf finished third. He was 2 strokes behind Miller. At the 1975 Masters, Weiskopf tied Miller for second place behind Nicklaus. Weiskopf was also in the field when Miller won his second major at the 1976 Open Championship. Weiskopf finished third. There was one big exception to this pattern. In 1973 at the Open Championship at Royal Troon, Weiskopf won his only major. He led the tournament from start to finish. In that case, Miller was the one chasing. Miller finished second, 3 strokes behind Weiskopf. So Weiskopf got his moment of glory too. The repeated close finishes made Weiskopf Miller's most frequent opponent in the mid-1970s. They were often battling each other for the top spots. They formed a secondary tier of dominance while both struggled to fully dethrone Nicklaus. The fact that they tied for second at the 1975 Masters showed their shared challenge. They were the top talents trying to break through during the Nicklaus era. They pushed each other hard, but Nicklaus still stood above them both. So Miller's rivalries with Nicklaus and Weiskopf were about pure competition. They fought on the course for titles and money and glory. The tension was fierce but professional. There was respect mixed with the desire to win. These rivalries defined Miller's playing career. They showed what he was capable of when he was at his absolute best. But then Miller moved to the broadcast booth. That's when a different kind of friction emerged. Miller's commentary style created cultural and media controversies. The tension was no longer about beating someone in a tournament. It was about what Miller said on air and how players and the public reacted. 3 players in particular felt the sting of Miller's unfiltered criticism: Justin Leonard, Rocco Mediate, and Ian Poulter. The incident with Justin Leonard happened during the 1999 Ryder Cup. The Ryder Cup is an intense team event. National pride is on the line. Emotions run high. Leonard struggled in his first couple of matches. Miller did not hold back. He said Leonard should have sat on the couch at the hotel and watched the matches on television. That was a brutal public criticism of an American player during a patriotic competition. Miller later explained why he said it. He was frustrated. Miller said he was so darn mad because the U.S. just could not win a Ryder Cup. Miller admitted his filter was poor, but he insisted his heart was in the right place. He wanted to motivate the American team. Miller had played on the Ryder Cup teams in 1975 and 1981. He viewed the event through the lens of ultimate performance and national duty. To Miller, Leonard's struggles were not just about technique. They represented a failure of competitive spirit in a high-pressure, patriotic setting. The reaction was strong. Fellow players like Jim Furyk and Davis Love III pushed back hard against Miller's comments. This showed that Miller's harsh criticism put him in direct opposition to the camaraderie of the current tour players, especially when national honor was involved. Miller was willing to use nationalist sentiment to justify his brutal public assessments. That did not sit well with the players who were actually competing. The Rocco Mediate incident in 2008 was even more explosive. Mediate was playing in a U.S. Open playoff against Tiger Woods. Mediate was the relatable underdog. Woods was the global superstar. Miller tried to draw a contrast between them, but the way he did it sparked outrage. Miller said Mediate looks like the guy who cleans Tiger's swimming pool. He also said guys with the name of Rocco don't get on the trophy, do they? Those comments caused immediate backlash. The National Italian-American Foundation and other groups demanded an apology and suspension. They argued Miller's remarks could be interpreted as anti-Italian slurs. They said Miller reinforced a demeaning and damaging stereotype about an entire ethnic group. NBC had to address the controversy publicly. Miller apologized. He said his intent was just to convey his affection and admiration for Rocco's everyman qualities. But the damage was done. This incident showed the clash between Miller's old-school, off-the-cuff style and modern cultural sensitivity. Miller admitted he said something he should not have said about every third tournament. By linking physical appearance and an ethnic name to a low-status job, Miller violated contemporary standards of acceptable commentary. Mediate himself shrugged it off. He texted back saying, "Johnny says a lot of things. He doesn't think before he engages, and that's just Johnny." But the network's apologies signaled that accountability for Miller's words now extended beyond the player. Cultural advocacy groups and the broader public were watching and judging. The Ian Poulter incident in 2013 highlighted how the digital age changed things. During a broadcast, Miller criticized Poulter for taking too much time to address a shot in high winds. Miller called the English player dramatic. That was classic Miller. He was implying Poulter lacked mental toughness or had excessive mannerisms, but Poulter did not respond through traditional channels. He fired off a tweet directly at Miller. Poulter wrote Johnny Miller, "Why don't you come interview me live and say that stuff straight to my face?" This was a new kind of confrontation. Miller's critique had always been delivered from the safety of the broadcast booth. Now Poulter challenged him instantly and publicly on social media. Poulter bypassed the usual media gatekeepers. He forced Miller into immediate personal accountability. This marked a shift in power. Modern athletes could now directly engage with and challenge media criticism in real time. Miller's protective bubble had been popped. Miller also had a pattern of critiquing modern players for their technique. Phil Mickelson was a frequent target. Miller often pointed out flaws in Mickelson's swing. He said Mickelson would swing way past parallel with a tight, narrow motion. Miller believed Mickelson lacked the width of elite drivers like Tiger Woods or Jack Nicklaus. Miller speculated that if Mickelson could fix these issues, imagine how many wins he could have had. This was Miller's traditional mindset showing through. Even though Mickelson won 42 tournaments, Miller still saw mechanical problems that held him back. Miller believed in a specific classic ball striking approach. He even advocated for the controversial reverse C finish to stabilize the club face. His perspective made him seem like a traditionalist who was skeptical of the modern game. Miller thought modern equipment and easier course setups might be covering up mechanical and mental shortcomings in today's players. He was not shy about saying so. Miller's reluctance to give simple praise showed up in awkward moments. During a highlight reel of Mickelson's incredible shot-making, Miller inserted a negative joke. He said Mickelson took his car back to the airport on Friday, though, referencing a missed cut. People criticized Miller for throwing cold water on a positive moment. It reinforced his image as a sour, crotchety old man. Miller just could not resist adding a critical jab, even when celebrating someone's brilliance. So what do we make of Johnny Miller's legacy? His career splits into two clear eras. First, the on-course competitive battles of the 1970s with Nicklaus and Weiskopf. Second, the cultural and media friction during his broadcasting years with Leonard, Mediate, and Poulter. Both types of conflict came from the same place: Miller's exceptional talent and his deep personal understanding of performing under extreme pressure. Miller's authority as a critic came from his resume: 25 PGA Tour wins, 2 majors, a reputation as arguably the best ball striker of his generation. When Miller analyzed someone's technique, it carried weight. He had produced that legendary 63 at Oakmont. He knew what elite ball striking looked like because he had lived it. But the defining feature of Miller's commentary was his blunt psychological analysis, his willingness to use the word choke. That came directly from his own trauma. Miller's struggle with the yips after 1976 meant he viewed golf through the lens of mental fragility. His criticism was not just professional analysis, it was a projection of his own intense internal battle. Miller had fought for competitive control and lost. That shaped how he saw everyone else's failures. It allowed him to transform golf commentary from polite observation into ruthless expert diagnosis. The relationships Miller had with these 5 players fall into 2 categories. The friction with Nicklaus and Weiskopf was professional and competitive. It came from direct high-stakes battles in the 1970s. Miller's temporary supremacy in 1974 and the clashes in majors like the 1975 Masters defined those rivalries. The tension stayed within professional bounds. It allowed for lasting mutual respect. Both Nicklaus and Weiskopf recognized Miller's supreme talent even as they competed fiercely against him. The friction with Leonard, Mediate, and Poulter was different. It came from Miller's broadcast philosophy. Miller deliberately sought polarization. He wanted to elicit a response. His inability to control his language filter led to incidents involving cultural boundaries and media accountability. The Leonard situation involved national pride. The Mediate controversy involved ethnic stereotyping. The Poulter clash showed the power of digital confrontation. Miller's traditionalist, unfiltered style repeatedly collided with the sensitivities of the modern golf world. Miller's 29-year broadcast career accomplished exactly what he wanted. He became one of the most polarizing figures in golf. Viewers either loved him or hated him. There was no middle ground. Miller forced audiences and other analysts to confront uncomfortable truths about professional failure, psychological breakdowns, and technical flaws. He set a new standard for honesty and depth in golf commentary. Future analysts now have to measure themselves against what Miller created. By telling it like it is, Miller ensured his impact lasted beyond his retirement. Even after he stepped away in 2019, the memory of his blunt critique remains a defining measure of authority in golf analysis. Miller changed the conversation. He made it acceptable to point out when players choked. He made it normal to criticize technique even for Hall of Fame level golfers. He refused to offer empty praise. The influence of Miller's style can be seen in today's sports media. Analysts across all sports now feel more freedom to criticize athletes. The polite, deferential approach that dominated sports broadcasting before Miller has largely disappeared. Whether that change is good or bad depends on who you ask, but there is no question Miller was the pioneer. He proved that audiences would accept and even embrace harsh criticism if it came from someone with credibility. So before you go, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment and let me know which of these 5 rivalries surprised you the most. Was Miller's honesty refreshing, or did he cross the line too often? I'd love to hear your perspective on how his playing career shaped his broadcast style. Johnny Miller's legacy is complicated. He was a transformational figure who brought the intensity of an elite competitor into the broadcast booth. He made golf commentary sharper, more critical, and far more controversial. Some people appreciated his willingness to speak hard truths. Others felt he went too far and hurt the players he criticized. Either way, Miller left his mark on golf in a way few broadcasters ever have. His voice may be gone from the booth now, but the standard he set for unflinching honesty in golf analysis remains. Johnny Miller told it like it is, and the game of golf will never forget it.